Okay. Well, hi everyone. Welcome. This is Tuesday, October 6th, 2020. This is the Contour community meeting. We're going to get started. Jonas is here. We lost power, so we're going to go on without him. So the big thing today, I think, is the 1.9 release. Steve, I don't know if you want to talk about that or I can talk about it.
Yeah, I can talk through it a bit. I think, I mean, you were doing the execution. I think it's basically done, right? There's one or two more things that need to get updated.
Yeah, so we have to merge the quick start link, I think is the next thing.
Yep.
And then I'm trying to think of what else is left. I think that's it. And I got to fix editing the notes. The notes needed a little bit of love. I'm sorry, in the release notes to put some of the links into the release notes here that you had in the list. So,
oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
I can go through and do those, but yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot about the features that are coming up in this, but quick summary, we've got initial external authorization support. James just joined, so he's been doing a lot of work on that to support essentially configuring external authorization services that get configured in Envoy that can be used to authorize incoming requests. So that's a feature that I know folks have been excited for a long time. And then, yeah, backend TLS client auth, so allowing Envoy to present a client cert to upstream clusters so that the upstreams can verify that the connection's coming from Envoy. That was another community contributed feature, so definitely appreciate that one. And what else? We got core support, cross-origin resource sharing. So this enables you to configure Envoy's CORS filter through the HTTP proxy API. So apps can request resources from different origins. And then, yeah, a bunch of other stuff. We've finally upgraded to V1 custom resources, which allows us to do things like prune unknown fields and make kubectl explain fully work and support defaulting and better validation. So we're looking forward to having support for that. And yeah, I don't do, if anyone else wants to jump in on any of these, feel free.
Yeah, I know the condition stuff is new, so we're matching some of the upstream work where Contour currently had like a status, like basically was it valid or invalid, as well as a description, which works well if you only ever have one issue wrong or successful with your resource. So conditions now is an array, so you can have a set of conditions that apply to your status to give you more feedback. So I think the end goal here is to tell you, hey, this proxy has these 5 things that are wrong, to go fix it. Whereas before you would fix one thing and then a new issue would pop into that, and fix that, and a new issue would pop into that. So yeah, so that's some cool stuff. We added support for the Go control plane, so that one still needs a little bit of love, I think, but in an effort to switch away from our custom XDS bits, we have some of that added in, so it's an opt-in through the config file. So the Contour XDS server will still be the default going forward until you opt into that. That's also going to open us up with some room to move to the V3 XDS APIs. So there was a bunch of refactoring you might have seen where we've moved a bunch of packages around. So now that we have a true V2 Envoy V2 XDS API package in Contour, we can now add a V3 and then a V4 and a V5, whenever that comes out. So that's kind of cool. Some little bugs about DNS lookups and stuff. I know timeouts was a big thing you worked on, Steve. But we're going to validate some of those timeouts and annotations that come in and a bunch of deprecations. So TLS 1.1 is no longer a thing you should be using. So Contour now defaults to 1.2. If you want to opt into 1.1, you still can. You just need to do some configuration to do that. So that's about it, I think. For release, anyone have any questions? I guess it's just Daniel on here.
No questions from me.
Yeah, cool. If not, we can look at what we've been working on. I'm not sure if Steve or James, anything you want to chat about in terms of what's in progress right now.
I didn't really have anything worthy to mention. You know, I've just been working on getting stuff ready for the release and debugging some issues with Steve Sloka to be able to ship 1.9. So nothing major here for me.
Yeah, I don't have a lot. I've spent some time wrapping up the auth. I'm going to spend some more time on non-contour things like service APIs and code reviews for Danion's operator project.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot either. I hope to in 1.10 to get the V3, or hope that we can all work on it. The V3 XDS APIs in and working, so that'll help open up. I know some of the features that are blocked that are only V3 right now. So that'll be cool.
So the V3 is going to be like massive internal code duplication, right?
Yes.
It's hard to imagine it's hard to see an alternative to that.
I don't know. My initial thought was to just switch to V3 and drop V2. But I don't know how scary that sounds to folks.
Well, it's kind of the same thing, right? Like, it's just you do the giant code duplication all in one PR, or I mean, it's sort of the same problem, right? There's no real good. Haven't figured out any good alternative to, duplicating all the code we have that depends on the V2 protobufs, and whether you duplicate them, whether you duplicate all that, and delete the V2 at the same time, or whether you duplicate all that and delete the V2 a little bit later is.
I mean, I guess in my head, my thought we might have like a feature branch that would roll. Would be super annoying to rebase into, but because you couldn't do it all in one PR. I think it'd be too much to do it all once. But if you move from 2 to 3, then you can just have that work in parallel and then eventually move over. But the tricky part is as features come in, what do you implement, V2 or V3, and then you have to do it again, and it would be very tricky. So yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good solution either, short of duplicating like we're going to do, I think.
Yeah, I think the main yeah. By volume, I mean duplicating the code by volume is probably mainly in the test fixtures. That it's also hard to see how you can. Well, I mean, if you spend a long time building APIs around that, perhaps you could emit test fixtures, but they tend to be. I mean, the size of the API surface kind of approaches the size of the protobuf, so they kind of tend to converge in ways which it would be difficult to hide.
Yeah, and they're very, very, very similar, which is the other tricky part. I think Steve Chris had an idea of just converting the V2 to V3, like outputting those, but there are some fields that are a little different that have moved around, so that could be a little tricky doing that.
You could type alias some stuff that might help you in some ways, like for things where they're common. You could have a type alias and then just share the common code. Can you do that and go? Maybe you can't.
Yeah. I think there's some opportunities that we can refactor some things out too. Like there is a common out here in Contour, there's some common bits I left in. So if you look at like internal, like XDS cache, there are some bits here that like resources and not much, I guess, but some things that were generic between all of the versions, that weren't specific to a version. So I bet there's things in these versions that we could possibly pick out and do things with. I thought about making these. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I mean,
no,
XDS.
You go. I'm done.
was going to say, like, the XDS cache interface itself, the snapshot cache, isn't version specific because it's just protobufs. It's just a
Yeah,
map of protobufs, so you can
yeah,
interface. So you can pretty easily have an interface that wraps the internal versions of that.
yeah. I did that on one thing. I was replacing this typed here to be like an interface. Yeah, and this could be generic, but it didn't bias much. You know what I mean? Like, end of the day, it was just these couple methods, and then everything else was still the same. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you end up copying all the feature tests, right? Because those are all asserting on Envoy types, and then all of the internal Envoy package and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, the visitor. I mean, the specific thing in these cache resource caches is the visitor and the type URL. But then, as you say, the rest of the code is pretty generic. So maybe you could just have a standard one. Maybe you could take the generic code and like make it one thing.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking. There probably are some things that we can, probably not in Contour, but in Envoy, that we could,
Yeah.
like here's a bunch of stuff that we reused, like coming up with health checks and these constants and those sort of things. 'Cause the scary part, like even this is going to have to move, I think, the bootstrap, because this is V2 actually as well.
Yep, you have to write a V. You have to write a. Well, you can write a V2 bootstrap, but the bootstrap needs to specify. You can write a V2 bootstrap, which specifies the V3 protocol, I think. But you probably have to write. You probably might as well just write a V3 bootstrap.
Yeah.
And because you have to, in the bootstrap has to tell Contour, has to tell Envoy to use V3.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. So we'll see. I'm hoping though there are some things as we go through this that we can pick apart and make generic. But yeah. Does anyone else have anything? Daniel, did you want to talk about anything or any operator bits or anything while we're all here?
No, I think we've been doing a lot of good collaboration through the PRs and issues, and just want to say a big thanks for all the reviews. And I'm just cranking away, trying to, hopefully get to something that actually, runs and manages multiple instances of Contour. So yeah, plugging away.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for your help on that. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think the exciting stuff it will be when we actually just kind of get past this, initial phase of, just essentially running the getting started deployment of Contour, and actually get to more of the interesting work. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of the value in the operator.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess one last mention of the operator as well is the group that I'm part of at Red Hat. I think I'm going to start. We got to a point in our planning process that we're able to start getting some other folks at Red Hat involved in the operator as well. So hopefully that will speed things up. And then, yeah, again, when we get to a point where the operator is actually doing some interesting stuff, then hopefully we start getting some other contributors involved in it as well. I think when we get to a point that the operator is doing useful things, and I'll kind of pause and start kind of just putting together things like doing a demo, recorded demos, that kind of stuff, just to kind of get the awareness out there.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
I think a demo would be. Yeah, I think a demo would be great. It'd be really helpful for people.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing?
Yeah.
Are you planning that to eventually manage the data plane as well? Is that something that you have a goal to do eventually?
So like managing like instances of Envoy?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so initially, the management of Envoy is just going to be how it's managed today through a daemon set resource, right? Beyond that, I don't know what, where we go from there. I think, goal number one, which I'm kind of just laser focused on, is like, how do we take those collection of YAMLs and the examples contour directory and have contour manage that? And then when we get to the point where it's like, okay, the contour, we've created, the contour operator, we've got a baseline. Now kind of where do we go from here? So in that process of creating that baseline, like what we've seen through the PR conversations, is we get to the point where, James, you have an idea, or maybe someone else has an idea. It's like, okay, let's track this stuff in issues. And when we get past this initial release of the operator of, hey, does what the examples contour directory does, then we go back and look at those issues and start to kind of prioritize and figure out, okay, well, where do we take this from here? So, that's kind of my thought process.
Cool. That makes sense, I think.
Yeah, and the reason for it is just like, okay, we have a baseline. I want to make sure like it does what we know like is working, which is everything from that examples contour directory, and it also kind of gives us a target and kind of have the operator and how the examples directory configures and does things. So we're on par there, and then we can start really doing some more interesting stuff with the operator, and whether it manages a data plane or, I don't really, I want to make sure that we're all on board with where we go beyond just kind of the first target. But I do want to kind of keep things simple initially, just so we have something that works, and try to prevent scope creep. Otherwise, we'll just keep going and going and going, and I do want to get to a point where at least we could do an initial release. So that's my thinking.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a good goal. And I think once you get to an initial release, I feel like there's some substantial amount of effort in, as you say, demoing and socializing and
Right.
Building consensus about whether the operator should be the way or maybe one of many ways. I don't think there's any. I'm not sure that there's a widely held consensus around that.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes. And I know when it comes to like management, configuration, all that stuff, everyone has their flavor that they like to use. But yeah, well, I think the more value that the operator can provide, will attract people to it, and that's my thought process. So, we'll see how it all comes along. But I guess on the socializing front too is I was contacted by his name's Kevin Connor, who's involved with Envoy from an Istio standpoint within Red Hat, and I guess they have plans to do some kind of presentation for their work at EnvoyCon. And so I'm supposed to meet with them because they're interested in the stuff we're doing with the contour operator and so forth. So I guess my question is does anyone in this group have any plans to be involved in EnvoyCon at all?
Yeah, I don't think any of us are presenting or anything, no.
Okay. Well, if there's anything interesting that comes from this conversation that I had with Kevin Connor, I'll let people know, but we'll see where that conversation where the conversation goes.
Cool, thanks.
Still,
I'd be pretty interested in better integration between Contour and Istio and figuring out what people want there and what we can actually do. I think Taro's changed to use client certificates from the Envoy for backend proxy connections gives us a way into the Envoy, into the Istio mesh at that point, I think. But it still needs a bit of research and documentation and productization. But yeah, better integration between Contour and service meshes in general, I think, is something we should be interested in.
yeah, I agree.
Well, I think we're almost to the hour. If there's nothing else, probably can end it a few minutes short. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks Daniel for coming and sharing your operator updates and the other stuff. That's awesome. So 1.9 is out. Go upgrade and have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.